House Leader, third party.
Speaker. Honourable Speaker, on August 4th, 2014, the largest mining disaster in BC history happened. We all know the story. We know that Imperial Mines was repeatedly warned by government over several years that its tailings pond was above the authorized level. We know that reports raised serious concerns about the need to find a sustainable way to discharge the excess water. We know that in 2012, UVic's Environmental Law Centre warned that the environmental assessment certificates for mines issued by government are vague and unenforceable. And now we know conclusively that the province will not be pursuing any charges against this company. What troubles me most about this is that whether it was government inaction or a company at fault, the warning signs for this disaster were all there, and yet no action was taken. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Environment. Given the documented pattern of non-compliance at Mount Polley mine and the disastrous impacts of the tailings breach, can the Minister explain why the BC government has chosen not to pursue charges in this case?
Minister of the Environment and Climate Change Strategy.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. The incident, the environmental disaster, perhaps the largest environmental disaster in BC history, to which the member refers, must never be allowed to happen again. Let me just start by making that absolutely clear. But that disaster followed years of deep cuts to inspections and monitoring under the previous government. We are taking a number of steps to address that, including reviewing the professional reliance model, including ensuring that we have a greater inspection capacity on the ground. With respect to the decision which was made by the BC Prosecution Service not to proceed on the private prosecution, that is an independent decision made by that service. But what I can tell the member, the investigation continues. It's a cooperative investigation between the BC Conservation Officer Service and federal officials, including the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. I have sought assurances from my staff as well as from federal staff that that investigation will be completed well within the statute of limitations that applies federally. The penalties under federal law, including the possibility of criminal prosecution, are far more severe than those in BC. If they are warranted, I am confident the investigation underway will support them.
House Leader, third party on a supplemental.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I appreciate the Minister saying that this kind of disaster must never be allowed to happen again in BC. But what this fundamentally comes down to is trust. Communities across this province rely on government to ensure that our laws are kept up to date and that regulations are enforced. A UN report released last fall did not paint a positive picture. Canada has the second highest number of mines tailing spills in the world due to too many financially risky, marginal mines being permitted. Alaska has repeatedly raised the alarm over BC's lackadaisical mining regulations, citing concerns for salmon and drinking water. How many warnings need to be given before actual action takes place? My question again is for the Minister of Environment. Beyond the reviews, what clear and concrete steps is this government going to take to address the shortcomings in the regulatory and legislative framework that oversees mining in BC?
Minister of the Environment and Climate Change Strategy.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you again to the member. The member has pointed to the lack of faith of British Columbians that we have the ability, the regulatory regime, and the staff to protect our environmental interests while we grow a sustainable economy. That's why we're reviewing the professional reliance model, a review that is well underway. That is why shortly I'll be announcing a review of our environmental assessment process, which will include the conditions that are put on projects that are approved, as well as ensuring that projects that are approved are sustainable, supported by First Nations and communities, and meet strong environmental standards. My colleague, the Minister of Energy and Mines, in fact, is reviewing the permitting of mines and the enforcement of those permits to ensure that conditions in existing mines protect the public interest and our environment. We will continue to work together, as we will with other ministries, to ensure that the public has faith and trust in our regime to protect our environment and a sustainable economy.